Welcome to episode 55 of the Your Way podcast. I have an amazing guest with me today, the incredible Ana-Maria Georgieva. We've been practicing me saying her name properly. Did I get it right?
Yes, you nailed it.
Brilliant. So I've been in a mastermind with Ana-Maria, and there's lots of different reasons why I invited her on, and I kind of want to start there before I ask you to introduce yourself properly. Um, so I felt a strong connection with Ana-Maria straight away, but one of the things that struck me, but in a way that probably, or not probably, did put me into this sort of like not particularly healthy sort of self-comparison trap, was that Ana-Maria messaged me and she was like, I can see your aura. And I can't remember the word you used, but I'm just going to go for like lovely. I can see your aura. I could see your aura. And it was this. And I was like, I don't see people's auras. I don't see people's auras. Anyway, and so actually one of the topics that we came to talk about today was owning your gifts. Because it was certainly one of the things for me through our space together was getting to this place of, well, no, this is who I am. This is what I'm here to do. This is really important work. And it's work that only I can uniquely do. And I think you went through it, although you were kind of already there, you went through a similar transition. So the two of us behind the scenes have been talking about actually how important it is to have this conversation for other people to listen to and enjoy around really stepping into that place of accepting and allowing all of who you are and your unique gift without getting into this compare and despair because who you are isn't somebody else. So Ana-Maria, welcome. If you want to let people know a little bit about you and what you do, and then we can see where the conversation goes.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Louise, for the invitation. And it's such a joy to be here because, as Louise and I were talking before we started the podcast, one of the overarching theme of my mission is to embrace our wholeness and to return to who we have always been. And when she asked me how do I want to introduce myself, I told Louise that at this phase, I believe that our energy is our resume. If you're really curious to learn about who is Ana-Maria, of course you can go in the description of this podcast and learn more about me. However, the reason I'm here is because I'm someone who speaks from integration, embodiment, and integrity. And I believe that this is way more important to you to hear than if I am here to list all of the things I have done in this lifetime. And speaking of this ownership, again, I do want to say that I didn't just wake up this morning feeling awesome about myself. and and this is exactly why I believe this podcast is going to be impactful because it comes from embodiment. Both Louis and I, we have faced those shadows of, am I enough? Am I as enough as someone else? And how funny is that we look at someone else's gifts and we completely undermine our own gifts. And as you know, some of us have claircognizance or clairsentience or clairvoyance, and these are just fancy terms to say that all of us have spiritual gifts. And and this is why I believe that it is very important to strip the external noise and remember that if everybody was the same, how would we serve different people? Because we would be just copies of copies of copies. And instead, the people Louise serves are uniquely tied to her in the blueprint of her predetermined life purpose. The leaders I serve are uniquely designed for our mutual growth and so forth and so forth. So this is the first thing to mention as we are diving into this topic, that the very first thing for us to integrate and to release comparison for good, for permanently, forever, is to remember that everyone's story is like two cooks preparing the same meal. Is even if they follow the recipe to the T, it is still going to be so different because we infuse our energy, we infuse our personality, we infuse our thoughts of the day into whatever we're cooking, whether it is physical or metaphysical. And I'm curious, Louise, as we are following with this metaphor of of trusting our own creativity, really. For me, letting go of comparison, it really comes from embracing the inner child. And this is also cornerstone of my work, the inner child integration, because what happens when our inner child is happy and flamboyant and free and expressive, children rarely compare unless they have been raised in an environment where parents made it conducive for them to compare. Children were born whole
Yeah.
and totally confident, and it's only when you are predisposed to not feeling enough environmentally when you start to compare.
Yeah, and I think that's so, so true. And so for me, I did grow up in an environment where there was an awful lot of comparison. Now, we can argue whether or not it was better or worse for me, but I was the oldest. Um, Actually, no, it did work both ways. So I was the oldest. I was always very clever. I did very well at school. So my sisters got the flip side of that comparison. But also as a child, I was overweight and my sisters were very slim. And so I got the flip side of that comparison of like it was better to be thin and it was very, very bad to be overweight. And it was better to be clever than it was to be something else, which is so interesting because I don't think like obviously I have a certain amount of intelligence, right? That has to be true for me to have gone off and done tax law and all the things that I've achieved. But I'm not clever in that traditional sort of sense. Like the more me I become, the more I'm kind of emotionally intelligent and like when I give my brain a little bit of a break, like it doesn't actually want to work that hard. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't want to work that hard in the traditional sense. I'm much more happy to be grappling with, you know, an emotional thing or an energetic thing or like what does my dream mean? Than a spreadsheet. Um, but I think it is a big, big thing. And then the other thing that I want to touch upon is your piece around the inner child. So I don't know what modality you use. I use internal family systems therapy with my clients, but it's, you know, in the inner child is the inner like it is a process. But it's one of the massive big things for me because when I was two, my mum's mum was diagnosed with breast cancer. She died when I was seven. Between that time, my mum had two more children. So I've got two younger sisters. And I, I don't know that fun was really fun was really a part of my experience. And so as an adult, learning to let go, learning to have fun, learning to be free spirited, learning to give my inner child that ability to play and have fun has been a massive thing for me to integrate. And not last weekend, but the weekend before, I had a birthday party for my 40th at home and we had a silent disco. And it was just amazing to watch me and my husband Nat be able to play in the garden, even when everyone else was like, "I'm not drunk enough yet. I can't dance." Well, I don't really drink, so there wasn't a point of like, "I'm gonna get drunk." That's not really part of my thing. But it was just so fun to let that out. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't be showing up here vulnerably and authentically if I didn't say that it's been one of my biggest challenges because everything for so long was so tight and so bound and so controlled because that's how I learned to manage my anxiety and the stress and the stuff that I was dealing with. So whether I was being controlling around, well, this literally everything, food, life, organization,
Yes,
yeah,
I
massive.
totally relate. And this is why there is no coincidence that many of us who are also empaths, or at the very least, we're compassionate beings, sensitive, many of us have gone through some sort of an eating disorder, or even if it's not an eating disorder in the clinical sense, many of us have had any sort of suppression, shame around our bodies, because, of course, as you know, all of you, we store so much emotion in the sacral
Mm.
chakra. And Louise, you said so much that I would like to touch on. I feel like, again, for the benefit of the audience, again, we are diving into today's topic. I feel like this inner child is perhaps one of the most important um, messages from today, because
Yeah.
one of the things I talk about a lot, even in my book, The Legacy Codex, is that I feel like in the personal development world, I know that again we attract who we are. So I'm sure that everyone listening to this podcast is highly emotionally intelligent to be attracted to you. So this is a given. I imagine you have done a lot of personal growth and personal development, and you are familiar with terms like inner child and whatnot. And I feel like there comes a point when all of this intellectual understanding starts to override the psychosomatic integration, because this is where the ego can get boastful and be like, oh, I know this already. Oh, I know it. Yes, I know this. And when we get sassy with this, I know this, we don't realize that it's one thing to know, another thing to be embodied. And this is why what Louise said is very important, that vulnerability. And again, this is one of the things that I'm really passionate about, because in real life, vulnerability is not easy. I'm sure you have listened to Brené Brown, and I'm sure you agree. She's brilliant. She brought so much novelty, and she's a revolutionary. I have so much respect for Brené Brown. And at the same time, again, how we evolve and every generation evolves. A lot of people were so impacted by her for life, absolutely. However, unfortunately, we also see how a lot of coaches and practitioners use these buzzwords, vulnerability and inner child and authenticity and whatnot. And the truth is that when we are in those moments, as you said, this was a very good example, real life example. You are at a party, whether it's your party or you go to a party, and what happens if you cannot let go without alcohol or other crutch? And again, having a glass of wine, especially in Europe, I'm also from Europe. For me, that's classy. But you know what I mean? It's that ability to enjoy without needing a drink, without needing caffeine to stay alert, and without needing any sort of substance to get the source of substance. And the last thing I want to share before I throw the ball back to you, again, you said so much, so I'm kind of choosing where to
Yeah,
respond.
go for it. Yeah.
um, of course, I relate so much to a lot of the things you said, and it's so interesting. You said that you are the oldest um, child, because my character in my book, Emily, is also the oldest child, and I think that's in itself comes with certain experiences, responsibilities, um, and this goes to show that even if someone hasn't been raised in trauma, um, there's still so much that we go through. That's the assignment of life. My belief is that our purpose is not just to live, although living is also a great accomplishment. Some people just go through life. So let's say you got to this place when you are living, and that's fantastic. You're having fun, you're playing. Now for me, the next level, the ascension of this, is when you realize why are you living. You're not just living to have fun and to enjoy yourself, even though again for many high achievers this in itself is an accomplishment, to
Yeah.
relax. And then the next level for me is the why behind living. And for me, the why behind living is to evolve. And as Louise mentioned, you get to this place of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, and I call it spiritual intelligence, even when you're like, okay, I see certain patterns and how they played out, and I see this and that, and I now making sense of this puzzle that is called my life. And now I am in this integration. So the last thing I want to say is, again, I always strive to share digestible chunks so that the meal we're cooking together is it's enjoyable, and you're like, I enjoy this meal. So again, the first thing, if you are some of you like to take notes, is to mm, have a conversation with your inner child, just like Louis and I are doing spontaneously, and ask yourself, how was I raised? Was I comparing myself to my siblings or others? What other people comparing to me, which was giving me a lot of pressure to always be perfect, whatever it is. So this could be the first step to really look within and ask yourself, from where is this comparison coming from? And again, Louis was vulnerable, so I'm going to be vulnerable too, and share how again speaking, this was such a great way to start the podcast when you said that sometimes we just don't see our gifts because we're like, oh, someone else is saying it a different way. And again, this is like constant looking around is coming from being hyper vigilant as a child when we weren't given enough confirmation or hugs, or just presence. And for me, it's so interesting that I had a totally different experience, Liz. um, but like for me, like you mentioned earlier, oh, I don't see or as am I as someone as um
Yeah.
for me it was the other way around, in the sense that I didn't recognize that I have gifts. Like for me it was just intuition. I didn't make much of it. I didn't think much of it. And my comparison was coming from over intellectualizing my gifts. I was like, okay, let me get all the academic empirical proof that what I'm sensing is legit, so that if someone asks me what modality are you using, I can quote what modality am I using, when in truth, one of my gift is just this claircognizance, which means inner knowing, which means I just know, like I can look at you and know exactly what's happening inside you, and it happens. And before I used to, like I said, compare and be like, okay, so how do I prove? How do I prove that what I'm
Mm.
saying is actually coming from the source? So without going any further, again, to stay on track with the topic, which is letting go of comparison, the first thing is the inner child integration and realizing from where those comparison coming from. And then the second thing, and I would like to again come back to you, Louise, is like what happens when we literally let go of comparing and proving? Like what happens? What possibilities awaken?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to caveat this one because which I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I got a message from Vanessa, who we both know before, and she'd had an email, and it was about the different archetypes that high performers tend to follow. And I can't remember what the first one was. The second one was the martyr, and then the third one was like the embodied feminine. And I was like, for myself, I can see because I feel like I'm really in some kind of ego death right now. It's
Yes.
super fun, right? So I can see that there was a part of me shifting to this place of like what would be realized if there was no comparison, if I just let go. And then there's a part of me that's still trying to
Yes.
cling on because it's like, no, 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 but that's familiar. Don't let go of this. So on the days where I'm I'm not comparing and I'm just living my life, I'm carefree, I am free-spirited, I am just out, I'm living my life, I'm living my life, I feel connected, I'm in my body, I'm getting guidance. Yesterday morning, so I had this thing recently where the way to use my crystal ball, this came into me, the way I have to use my crystal ball that Nat got me for my birthday is I have to hold it to my heart and I have to sit quietly and breathe until the message comes through from the crystal ball. Yesterday morning, you need to go and find the pink flowers. They've got a message for you. I was like, okay, doesn't make any sense to me. I go to take the dog on a go to take the dog on a walk, and I get a message from my friend asking me if I'm free tomorrow for a walk. She's just been stood up by one of her friends, so she's gone up the hill by our house on her own. And I was like, well, I'm just taking Sydney out now, and I've got a couple of hours. I was like, shall I come up and meet you? So the place where we choose to meet, which is not where I was going to go on the walk, is a field full of two different kinds of pink flowers. And we stayed together for a little while, and then she wanted to do a longer walk than me, so she went off. I came back and then had my little check in with the flowers of like, what's your message for me? And that that experience is what happens when I'm not in comparison, I'm not pushing, I'm not hustling, I'm not trying to do anything else. I'm just in the moment, receiving the guidance, following the nudges, enjoying the gorgeous countryside around me, not not worrying, not overthinking, just being, um, which is incredible. And I still do have days where I'm like, oh, it's not working. What's the point? You said something beautiful, and I completely agree. about the kind of evolution of our self personal development work. So it's like we look at ourselves first and we heal a lot of that stuff, and then we get to a point where we can live and do our thing and be embodied. And then there is another thing, which for me is like Wealthy Witch is the Mission, my mastermind, right? That's that next evolution of, okay, but now I'm in this place, I've done the nervous system, I've done all this stuff, right? And now I feel like there's something bigger that wants to come through me. Like there's a purpose, there's a mission here that I deeply need to fulfill and I really need to fulfill. And this is what I'm here for. Um, and so some days I'm really in that space, and other days I'm like, well, what's the point? What's the point? Because I feel very strongly that I am here to evolve. I'm here to help other people evolve. That the most important thing we can do alongside having a good life is to increase our consciousness, because that's kind of what we're here to do. And then other days I'm like, but what's the point? Look at the world. It's all a mess.
Yeah, yeah. That's again ego versus heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say I still have periods where there is that tussle. And I don't know, like maybe you can talk to it. Does does that go away? Is it always there, but you're just in a different relationship with it? So the ego comes in, but then immediate, like not necessarily immediately, but like the ego comes in and you're like, oh, hey there, my friend. You're in the back seat, remember, because I'm driving now in the front with my heart. Right.
Yes.
So it'd be interesting to hear from your perspective how
Mhm.
it evolved for you. But just being very honest, that's where I'm at.
Oh yeah, oh wow, this is such a great turn from this conversation, and you said so much, and in fact you already said the answer to how do we transcend the ego, and we are being, and then we are also in this complete transcendence of service. And you said it yourself, Louise, how when you are not here and you are here in the body, and this is so much more than divine feminine. I want to make it very clear because, for example, as you know, Nate, the heart-shaping perfectionist in my book, The Legacy Codex, goes through this massive up-leveling. And I'm not sure when did you come at the book reading. I shared a chapter when essentially he had already had the ego death, and then he was in as this complete spiritual. Um, I don't like the word spiritual awakening because again, it's almost like a cliche, but it is this spiritual remembrance
Yes.
of
Yeah, yeah.
who he is.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said, ego that this is also coming a lot inside my private work at Energy Alchemy, and it's so interesting that just yesterday I had a conversation with a brilliant client, and she's a brilliant coach, an NLP coach, and again she herself got through this process of um, being super educated and learning from top experts in NLP, and she realized that her gift, the reason she's such a brilliant coach, is because of who she is. And she probably uses like just a percentage of NLP, and the rest is just her somatic intelligence. And the reason I'm saying this here is because again, this is for me, it's an overarching theme of today's conversation, that it's sure we usually get to this empirical knowledge because it helps us make sense of the world, as you said, and just gonna be like, okay, now I realize how things are tied together, and we have the language to describe it. However, then the next level is, okay, I'm again, even many of you are familiar with like the frequency of how the emotions up level according to um David Hawkins,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how, yes, and how at the top is not the rational mind. It's not even love. Even love is such a powerful emotion. It is inner peace and equanimity. This is when we are in this complete sync with source. And without going there again, just want to finish my example with my client, who is a brilliant NLP coach, and this was exactly what we were discussing yesterday. And I told her, what you're experiencing, your ego tries to tell you is self-sabotage or like losing interest. No, you are experiencing an ego death, which is totally different from self-sabotage. And I know for many of you, this could be an aha moment from this podcast because, again, self sabotage is when we're sabotaging our growth from our current perspective. Like we're stuck in our identity and we're clinging to it. As you said, this was such a great word to use. Now, a good that is when we're not clinging to anything. We're just like our consciousness is like in this almost turbulence,
Hmm.
protuberance, when we're just like,
Yeah.
and then there is no self-sabotage. Like the reason you are no longer relating to your environment is not self-sabotage, is not apathy, is not ignorance. It is just that you're waking up to something that is so much bigger than yourself. What you, Luis, what you're describing is exactly what happens. You're like, I don't need more. I love my life. I have finally gotten to a place. This is why I keep saying that, because I cannot stress this enough. For the majority of the high achievers, type A high performers out there, just getting to a place of enjoying life is humongous, humongous.
Yeah.
And then you enjoy it maybe a couple of months, a couple of years. Maybe you take a sabbatical, maybe you just, travel the world, whatever it is. And yet, for those of us who are highly purpose driven, there comes a point when you're like, okay, so what is now? When I no longer base my self-worth on how much I make money wise, or how I look, or am I as good as somebody else? And this is where again comparison just dissolves, and then you're like in this transcendence. So the last thing you were voicing out loud is, does the essentially like all of this chatter go away, or do we just embrace it? And as you said, we are the in the driver's seat, and we know that whatever noises are there, they're just residual voices. And the way I experience it and the way I describe it is, again, the word evolution really comes to me. We evolve past this point when we clearly, just like in meditation, when you realize I'm not my thoughts. And this is such a sweet spot when you can clearly understand that there is like a bigger picture, and it's not about the human in you. And in fact, this is how I like to describe it. This is when your human self meets your non-human self, whether we call it God self or just divine expression of who you are, doesn't matter. This is when your human self meets your non-human self, and all of these distortions dissolve, because you cannot physically compare to someone else when you are not in your human self. We only compare when we are in our human self.
Yeah. I love that. So I'd love you to share a little bit, whatever feels good, about your experience. Because you said something before, I can't remember the exact word you used, but it was something like, I didn't just wake up this morning feeling this good or this happy, right? So we all have our story and our path and our things that we've worked through. And and you said back whenever it was, you knew that you had this intuition, you knew you had these things there, but you hadn't necessarily honed onto them as your gifts. You still went off and did the kind of intellectual pursuits. So, like, what would be your summary around what the journeys look like for you? I also just want to say, because in case I forget, because I've thought it a couple of times now, I really love your food metaphors. And sometimes I see your food on social media and it always looks really good. I'm like, definitely Ana-Maria needs to cook me a meal.
My husband is a spectacular cook, and it's been again such a journey, as you said, because I had an eating disorder in my early 20s, and just again going back to pleasure, enjoying food, enjoying my appetite, eating as much as I want. I'm currently pregnant, and I feel like I've had such a blessed pregnancy, and of course I'm very grateful. However, I don't think anything is a coincidence. I really feel like all of my habits and how I eat and how I think and are contributing the well-being of myself and my body and my baby's health. And of course, food as a metaphor is super important, because many of us, especially women and men too, we have starved ourselves. of our true appetite, of our desires. And of course, we can look at it literally. Are you enjoying as much food as your body craves? Or it could be, of course, more metaphorical. Are you nurturing yourself and your desires, or are you telling yourself the practical thing is to do something else? So again, this is logic and intuition, and it's not either or. It is when logic, which is also important, is merging with intuition, and we are in this state of just allowance for things to happen. And to answer your question again, the evolution and the summary, which whew, you know,
Yeah, I
so much.
know, I know.
I'm going to do my best, and this is why I'm just so. Louise knows how happy I am with my book. And this is, I mean, the fact that I am so happy, and I say this on camera with this abandon and this joy, this for me summarizes my evolution. Because before I'll be like, she always say that I wrote the book. Is it too much? Am I bragging if I talk about my book? Am I distracting if I talk about my book? Whatever it is that I was, in my head, like this, the false humility. And I'm like, no, I wrote a book that activated me, and it's such a brilliant book in my mind. And of course, I am very happy to share it. And this book is a summary of my evolution because, Luis, the three archetypes, and they're all a part of me. Nate, the hard-achieving perfectionist, he's everything that I had to embrace in myself, like this extreme desire to be perfect, because if I wasn't perfect, I wasn't good enough. And also, again, what I admire about my character Nate is that he also has drive and ambition, which when it is channeled with good energy can change the world, because we do require that masculine courage and
Yeah,
ambition.
yeah.
And then we have Emily, the people pleaser turned unexpected plot twist, and she's the part of us that again is the overly sensitive one, the overly empathetic one, the one that always cares for others and is hyper vigilant about other people's emotions. And she usually has suppressed visionary potential because she is so busy looking at what other people are doing, she doesn't realize that she's the plot twist. And this is why I'm really proud of her in the book, because for me she truly illustrates empowerment, and not in the cliche way. She doesn't
Yeah,
just
and no, I was gonna say, and how does that mirror your experience?
oh yes, 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 I'm touching
Mm,
on that. So it
okay.
mirrors my experience, because Emily is the part of me, as I just said earlier. That's actually a very good question, Luis. That was a huge again self-awareness moment for me, because I used to identify so much with Nate, and thinking how focused I am, and organized I am, and confident I appear to others. And I didn't realize that I had stuck people pleasing, because in my mind I was associating people pleasing with people who are different than I was. And again, this is ego. You're different. No, we're not different. We're actually very similar. So of course it mirrors my journey, because it taught me so much compassion, understanding that me as an empath, I care, and I always care for others. It's just who I am. For me, this don't care about other people doesn't really work. Of course I care. And of course, even to this day, if I get like um a very negative comment, I might have an emotional response to it. So for me, it is not pretending that I don't feel a certain way. It is about realizing from where it is coming from and my childhood. And well, I'm not going to go into this too much. However, again, Nate and Emily represent for me my masculine and feminine polarities bridging together, which, of course, for many of you, it's also the path to transcendence, when we are not, as I said, we're just ambition and drive, or we're just emotions and sensitivity and intuition. This has to come together. Especially for us to change the world, we have to be in our full wholeness, because we require both energies. We require the masculine courage and assertiveness and being out there and just doing things. And we also require the feminine energy, as you were describing earlier, of taking it easy and taking a day off, which for many hard achievers is a day off. Are you kidding me? So this is also very important to cultivate that energy of chilling and surrendering. And then the acme point of my evolution And my up-leveling, if you wish, is the character stage, which is she's the powerful mystic. And Louise and I, we have had conversations about this, and I feel like this was the final piece of puzzle at this phase. Now I'm sorting out a new puzzle, but the puzzle that got sorted out at this phase of my life
Yeah.
um, was that also realization. Speaking of comparing, sometimes we can compare ourselves to us, Louis, which is again, it's super
Yeah.
interesting how this also happens when we finally realize our potential and we're like, okay, do I have to be this super high potential all the time, 24/7? And if I'm not, I'm failing. So that for me was the final piece of my activation, realizing that even though Sage is this powerful being and she's really cool and it's really fun to be her, she's the closest um, to the divine expression. And again, just to summarize, that for me was like a huge release. Like all of this pent up pressure of being a certain way just got released, and realizing that for me, again, if I'm to summarize, I know it's just so hard to summarize your life. But if I am to summarize, perhaps this is this like uh a realization that I have my human self, which is Ana-Maria, and she's a human being, and she goes to the bathroom, and she has, physiological needs and just emotions. And then I have the non-human self, which is going, and this version of me, she's going to continue living when I die. And that's also a very interesting way to look at your purpose, when you know that you are essentially building a foundation not just for this lifetime, if you believe in reincarnation, but you also build the foundation for what, even if you don't believe in reincarnation, again, you're creating something, legacy, that is going to outlive you. And that for me is, mm, when you are in the heart, not in the ego. When if you are in the ego, creating a legacy can feel like a lot of pressure and expectations. But when you are in the heart, building a legacy just feels like really what you are meant to do, and you have like a deep sense of inner peace around it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's definitely something that's come up for me. So a few episodes ago now, I had a lady called Tracy on, and she did a past life regression with me. And it wasn't my first foray into past lives, but it was the first kind of formal, let's spend 3 hours under hypnosis to do some past life work. Um, and that was really interesting because we sort of went into, I'm trying to think the terminology that's used. I don't think it matters really, but we kind of we connected into spirit and sort of the meeting that was had before I came back down and what was I here to do. Um, and it was very clear, like you need to go back and you need to help them to remember because they've forgotten, and which can encompass a whole number of things. But I think you are right. It feels very, very, it's a very different energy, but it's also quite a big shift to go from I need to earn this money or have this many clients or get this promotion, depending on what your thing is, in order to be valuable and worthy and earn my right to exist. And then you sort of shift all of that. And then that doesn't matter anymore. And then the money doesn't matter anymore. And then it's like, but if I'm not driven by the hustle and the need to prove and the money, well, then what am I doing? What's the point? And I think you're right. That is then when connecting into that mission, which for me does feel like a divine mission or a soul mission or a something else. It's a something that's kind of it's more than us. Like it's us, but it's more than us. Connecting into that then comes with this complete different level of drive because it isn't, oh, I need this thing in order to be worthy. It's like I'm literally here to do this thing. This is the point. This is the point. And I also come and I don't like everyone listening to this, you're allowed to have your own view because it's called the Your Way podcast. But for me, the work we do while we're in human form also determines where we then like what the next step looks like. So it's like I like to see it in my mind. I don't think I've talked about this publicly, but in my mind, It's like, I don't know if you had when you were a kid, like Sega Mega Drive or Sonic the Hedgehog, like, computer games, and you go through the levels and you collect the rings. And then once you complete the level, you go to the next level. So for me, it's like, well, how many levels can I complete? So the levels of kind of evolution and consciousness raising, how many levels can I complete while I'm here is also an important part of, for me, my purpose.
Yes, absolutely. And you said something very cool that I wanted to reflect back. When you said that when you did the past life time regression, you heard spirit telling you help people who have forgotten to remember who they are. And I really think this is a spot on message for you because many of your clients come from the corporate, and even if they're no longer in the corporate, they're still in this energy of remembering that there is more to life than just hustle and proving and pushing. And again, in the context of letting go of comparison, I feel like this is a very good example of how we are given different gifts. Because if we were given all of the gifts at once, it could be very overwhelming for our brain, for our body, and we wouldn't be able to excel at our gifts because we're like just so much happening at the same time. So this is why I feel like when you really awaken your purpose and you realize what is your, of course we have many different gifts, but what is your, like, the highlight of your gifts, and then you can concentrate on that, and then the comparison really gets dissolved, because when you are in your field, you just realize that this is what I'm meant to do and this is what I'm really good at. And that for me has been very helpful, because like I said previously, I used to uh, be a little bit confused. Like I have all kinds of things that I can do, and I was like, okay, so what is my gift actually? And as I mentioned, I used to think that my gift was coming from my knowledge, and again, knowledge versus wisdom. And that for me was also a huge self mirroring when I realized that presence is one of our highest gifts. Are we fully present?
Yes, yeah, massively. So I want to go back just slightly and then we'll kind of wrap things up a little bit. Um, I have, first of all, I think this is going to resonate with people that listen, because people that listen do tend to be a version of me. I will say, so I haven't read the book. I'm gonna ask you more about the book in a second, but I haven't read the book, but I have had the privilege and the pleasure of listening to Ana-Maria share parts of her book and have read parts of her book. Now, for me personally, I resonate with aspects of all the three characters as well. Um, Nate and Emily and Sage. And what I would say from my perspective is, so the book is called the Legacy Codex. Now, the idea of a codex might not necessarily be familiar to everybody listening to this. Like, we're very familiar with codes and all of the rest of it. But and I will obviously let Ana-Maria talk about it because it's her book. But for me, this book is like it is. So even though I've just said one of my things is to help people awaken and remember, this book is like an activation of a remembrance and an awakening of, well, what are the different facets that make us us, um and how incredible that is. But I don't think there has been a single extract from your book that you shared that I haven't been like, mm-hmm, yep,
See?
yep. So things I don't know. Um, when when is it properly available for people to get a hold of? Where can people get a hold of it? Is there anything else that you want to share before we kind of end? Is there anything that you're like, I wanted to talk about this and she didn't ask me? This is your time.
Oh, thank you, Louise. And of course, we can speak for many hours.
Yes, of
And
course.
thank you so much for the kind words. And this book is shared with a lot of love and compassion, and also this book activated me so much. So this is why I know that it's going to activate you. Regarding when is it going to be available, I mentioned that by the time this podcast is live, the book is going to be available. And I want to say something very interesting again, how when we surrender, things happen. When I told my mom and people around me, my mom has published many books, and I told her that this was in the end of May, and I told her that I'm going to be publishing my book by July. She was like, how would you publish a book and get an editor and inner layout and just go through all the steps in a month and some change? And she was like, most people take 6 months, if not more. Um, and and again, it's so interesting how I love my mom very much. However, I see how even like my cautiousness has evolved because my mom is still a little bit in that energy of um, intellectual accreditation of your work, even though I also think that my mom is brilliant. But without going into this, again, I feel like this is an overlying theme of today, like intellect versus transcendence. So I just want to put it out there. So to answer your question, the technicalities of the book when it is going to be available, again, I feel so blessed that things have been happening so easy, which for me is always a sign that things are a part of our mission. When it happens easy, is there still some effort involved? Well, of course, I wrote the book, I hired the people, good communication with them. So I want to say that I'm very mindful when we say non effort and effortless manifestation. This doesn't mean like you are on your couch all day long. Absolutely not. What we're saying, Louise and I are saying, is that of course there is still an exchange of energy and you're still showing up. However, it feels easy in the sense that there is no force. It just feels easy. I immediately clicked with my book cover designer and the inner layout designer and the editor. And this is very important. I don't say this just to say it. I say it because this wouldn't have been me even a couple of months. I would have self created roadblocks and impediments because I was holding back. So I just want to say that everything we see in the physical world is always a reflection of who we are on the inside. And once we remove the inner resistance, we are on the freeway. As you said earlier, we are behind the freeway. So the book is going to be available very, very shortly. We are at the very, very final phase of publishing, and it's going to be available on Amazon. Like I said, I imagine that by the time this podcast is live, the book is going to be available. And I'm so excited to share it with you.
Incredible. Thank you so much for being on and for sharing your guidance and your gifts. And we probably didn't even talk about like owning your gifts in the way that we didn't really plan it. Let's be clear. There was no plan. We were like, maybe we'll just talk about our gifts. But I think it is so, so powerful. And you're right, like one of the things that you have beautifully reflected back to me so often is like it was so important for me to do that, particularly for me, the nervous system work, the trauma work and the nervous system work, so that I was grounded and embodied and had that sufficient felt sense of safety to then access the metaphysical, the more spiritual gifts. Because I think if that had all come online at one point in time, where my system was at, that would have completely overwhelmed my system. And so then, of course, it makes perfect sense that one of my gifts here as a kind of grounded Taurian is to support people in that way too. It's like, yes, we're going to look at all of this stuff and we're going to create your mission, but we're also going to take care of you, the human vessel in the process, because that's what my people need, and that's what we've signed up for, me and them. And so if you were going to do your version of that, so you are an Aquarius. I do know this. This is right. I'm not making that up. So I know you did touch upon it earlier, but I think this is lovely just as a way to end, because if people, there'll be people listening to this podcast that are never meant to work with me, right? And maybe they're meant to work with you. So I know you talked before, so you might not want to say anything because I fully respect the energy as the frequency and the resume. But is there anything that you do feel called to say in terms of your gifts
Oh,
as we wrap up?
thank you, Louise. And it's so interesting that in my mind the topic of today was letting go of comparison. But of course, this is
That
how
was a
we
bit of
own
it still.
our
Yeah,
gifts.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and I feel like this was exactly what happened today. Both Louis and I were sharing naturally who we are, and of course, this is how we own our gifts. This is the authentic confidence. Regarding my gifts, and sure, yes, as I said, that energy is the resume. However, if I am to give you the technical language, mm, these days I describe myself as a former high performance strategist turned legacy oracle. What does it
Amazing.
mean in simple language? It means that if you were to work with me, and you are, again, this is a prerequisite at this phase of my growth and my evolution, you have done the work, you have done the nervous system integration, and you have very high self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and you are in this phase of, again, as we said, loving life. And even when there are human moments, you are not panicking, you're still able to self-soothe and self-nurture. And then what comes next? This is what I commend. This is my purpose. I like to say that my purpose is activating other people's purposes. And imagine that you are at this ascension bridge upward, and you're like, okay, so now how do I integrate my consciousness? And I would say, again, speaking of owning our gifts, one of my highest gift is that I'm also able to give a human language, practical language to what you are going through, and be like, okay, so here are now the action steps that we're anchoring in the physical world, because it can get a little bit um, all over the place. Okay, so this is my mission. I want this, I want this, I want this, and then we get all over the place. So it's important to have that masculine energy also of, okay, so here is the sequence, and then the divine feminine is the intuition. And this is why I call myself a legacy oracle, because my gift is more prophetic at this phase. You don't come to me to hear strategies, or although sometimes you do, which is okay. Uh, but it is that energy of you just wanting to be activated. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. When you know that you are brilliant and you are powerful beyond measure, and you just have so many gifts, and you just want that activation, which is non-verbal. And this is what I come in.
Amazing. I love that. I love that. And I think what you can also hear, I imagine those people listening, or certainly I can hear it, is that we, on some level, do similar work, but we just do it in our way. And therefore, the people that we work with will be, what's the word I'm looking for? Will be drawn to us individually and uniquely because of who we are and how we show up, not because of who we pretend to be. So when I'm talking about still having one foot in all of these different places and the struggles that I'm having and the ego death, there'll be some people that listen to that and they're like, oh, I don't want to work with that. She's not got that sorted out yet. And there'll be other people that listen to that and they're like, yes, this is exactly what I want. And then similarly, there'll be people that listen to you talking, Ana-Maria, and they'll be like, I don't understand what she's talking about because I'm not in that place of consciousness yet. I haven't done that work. I'm not in that place. And then there'll be other people that are like, I am so ready to not be given strategies unless they slip out. I am so ready not to be given strategies. And I'm like, all I really want is someone to hold me and activate me through this next level that I can feel is there. Um, and I feel like that's just a beautiful place to end. It's like we are all like, for anyone listening, because it's so easy to feel like you're in this massive market, but really you are the market because you are uniquely here to do a specific thing for a specific group of people. And I think that's a big thing for letting go of the comparison, actually, which is helpful for me and certainly something that I talk to clients about, is remembering that really you're a market of one, but you only really get to embody and be the market of one when you own all of who you are and allow that to come through. Because all the time you're in the comparison and the compare and the despair, and you then try and like carbon copy somebody else because you think that their way is going to be your way, then all of a sudden you're drowning in a sea of robots and no one's going to hear you because you're trying to be someone else, but there's already a big robot out there doing it. So, yes. Any last words before I finally finish?
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to receiving your comments. Those of you who are listening or watching, and as you said, when we fully own ourselves and our gifts, then everything becomes easy.
Amazing. So head to the show notes for the link to Ana-Maria's book on Amazon. Ana-Maria, where can people come and check you out otherwise?
You can check.
Which will also be in which will also be in the show notes, but just in case people are listening and they can't be asked to go and scroll down.
Thank you for that. You can connect with me and follow me on Instagram at Luna_Voda_Oracle, or Facebook, LinkedIn is with my name as you see it on the podcast, Ana-Maria Georgieva.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I will see everybody soon. Although saying that, possibly the next couple of episodes are going to be me on other people's podcasts because I am going to be in Bali having fun and not pushing or hustling. So, but we're recording this in July and I'm going away in September. So time will tell. But I suspect the next couple of podcasts are me on somebody else's podcast. All right, Ana-Maria, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please reach out to either or both of us to let us know what you made of the episode. And if you do get Ana-Maria's book, let us know what you think. Thanks, Ana-Maria.